I stood in the gleaming foyer of my Uncle Robert's new flagship restaurant, watching him schmooze investors and food critics, completely unaware that the woman he'd publicly humiliated 2 years ago now held the power to shut down everything he'd built. The same woman whose silly app for people who can't figure out dinner had just been acquired for $2.3 million. My name is Sophie Harris, and I'm 28 years old. 2 years ago, my wealthy family called my business idea a silly app for people who can't figure out dinner. Last month, that same app sold for $2.3 million. But let me start where it all began, in a cramped kitchen that smelled like desperation and empty promises. Growing up, our kitchen was the center of everything wrong with our world. Mom would stand there every evening, staring into a nearly empty pantry like it might magically produce dinner. 3 wilted carrots, half a bag of rice, and maybe some canned tomatoes that were approaching their expiration date. The refrigerator hummed loudly, mostly because it was working overtime to keep air cold. I remember watching her cry over bills spread across our tiny kitchen table. Not dramatic sobs, just quiet tears that fell while she tried to figure out what to cook with basically nothing. She worked 2 jobs, cleaning offices at night and stocking shelves during the day, yet somehow we never had enough money for groceries that lasted more than a few days. The worst part wasn't being hungry. Well, that sucked too, but the absolute worst part was watching my mom blame herself for not being a better meal planner. She'd apologize to me constantly. "I'm sorry, Sophie, I should be better at this. Other mothers know how to stretch ingredients." Makes sense why I became obsessed with solving this problem, right? Years later, after teaching myself to code through free online tutorials and working random consulting gigs to pay rent, I finally had an idea that felt bigger than just making money. What if families like mine could have an AI assistant that actually understood their struggles? Not some fancy meal planning app for people with unlimited budgets, but something real. My app would analyze your family size, dietary restrictions, budget, and even local grocery prices. Then it would create meal plans that actually made sense. Shopping lists organized by store layout, prep schedules for busy parents, even suggestions for using leftovers so nothing got wasted. The technology part was complex, but the goal was simple: eliminate the daily stress of figuring out what's for dinner. I spent 8 months building the first version, using my savings from consulting work. Every free hour went into coding, testing, and refining. My apartment looked like a tech startup threw up: empty coffee cups, sticky notes everywhere, and at least 3 laptops running different versions of the app. The beta testing phase gave me hope I hadn't felt since childhood. Local families started using early versions, and the feedback was incredible. Single mothers messaged me saying the app saved them hours each week. Parents with picky kids found meals their families actually ate. One user told me she saved over $200 on groceries in her first month, but here's the thing about bootstrap development. Eventually you run out of bootstrap. I needed real funding to launch properly, hire developers, and scale the user base. My consulting income could only stretch so far, and I was burning through savings faster than I wanted to admit. That's when I remembered something about my family. The Harris clan had always been supportive of each other's business ventures. My cousin Marcus got help starting his construction company. Uncle Robert received family investment for his first restaurant. Even my cousin Lisa got backing for her boutique clothing store. I wasn't asking for much, just $10,000 to get things moving, enough to hire a part-time developer and cover server costs for the first year. Given my family's track record of supporting each other, it seemed like a reasonable request. The annual Harris family reunion was coming up in 3 weeks. Perfect timing to present my idea, share the positive feedback from beta users, and hopefully walk away with enough funding to change everything. What happened at that reunion would reshape not just my business, but my entire understanding of family, success, and who really deserves to win. The annual Harris family reunion happened at my cousin Marcus's estate. Yeah, the same Marcus who got family funding for his construction company. His house looked like someone took a magazine photo of successful American family and built it in real life. Manicured lawns, circular driveway, fountain in the front yard. The whole thing screamed, "We made it." I pulled up in my 8-year-old Honda Civic, which suddenly felt like arriving at a yacht club in a canoe. Well, this was already going great. Walking through those massive front doors felt like entering a different world. Everyone looked polished, designer clothes, perfect hair, expensive watches catching the light. Then there was me in my best business casual outfit from Target carrying a laptop bag that had seen better days. But I had something they didn't, a solution to a real problem. That had to count for something, right? The family gathered in Marcus's living room, which was bigger than my entire apartment. I mean, this room had a chandelier that probably cost more than my car. Uncle Robert dominated the conversation as usual, bragging about his restaurant empire. Cousin Lisa showed off photos from her latest vacation in Europe. Everyone was performing success like it was an Olympic sport. "Sophie!" Aunt Margaret called out. "How nice to see you. Still doing that computer thing?" That computer thing, right. The thing that was going to revolutionize meal planning for millions of families. But sure, let's call it that computer thing. I waited for the right moment, then cleared my throat. Actually, I wanted to share something with everyone. A business opportunity that could really make a difference. The room got quiet. Finally, some attention. I opened my laptop and launched into my presentation, showed them the demo, walked through user feedback, explained the market research, real families saving real money and reducing real stress. The beta users loved it. Early metrics were incredible. All I needed was $10,000 to take it to the next level. The silence stretched longer than I expected. Then Uncle Robert started laughing, not a polite chuckle, full-blown belly laughs like I'd just told the funniest joke he'd ever heard. "An app for people who can't figure out dinner? Really, Sophie?" The room erupted in giggles. My cheeks burned like someone had slapped me. "I mean," Robert continued, wiping tears from his eyes, "isn't meal planning just common sense? Why would anyone pay for something their grandmother did for free?" Cousin Marcus chimed in next. "Real entrepreneurs don't need family handouts for silly ideas like this. When I started my construction company, I had a real business plan." Let's not forget that Marcus got $15,000 from this same family to start that construction company, but apparently that was different. Lisa decided to pile on too. "Maybe you should focus on getting a stable job first. All this tech stuff seems so unreliable." The worst part wasn't the mockery. Well, that sucked plenty, but the worst part was how quickly everyone agreed, like they'd been waiting years to tell me exactly what they thought of my dreams. "Sophie's always been the charity case of the family," Aunt Margaret whispered to Cousin Sarah, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Now she's always asking for money." Always asking for money? This was literally the first time I'd ever asked them for anything. Uncle Robert wasn't finished. "Look, sweetheart, your target market is people who probably can't afford to eat at real restaurants anyway. Why would we invest in something that serves, people like that? People like that. People like my mother, people like me growing up, people like the single mothers who were beta testing my app and saving hundreds of dollars on groceries." The rejection was swift and unanimous. Not only no, but hell no. They suggested I stop wasting time on foolish dreams and find something more realistic, like a job at someone else's company doing someone else's work for someone else's profit. Then came the final blow. "We've been talking," Marcus said, glancing around the room for support, "and we think it's best if you take some time away from family gatherings until you get your priorities straight." Translation: "We're kicking you out of the family unless you abandon your business and become what we want you to be." I packed up my laptop in silence. Nobody said goodbye. Nobody walked me to the door. I just left. Driving home felt like the longest trip of my life. My hands shook on the steering wheel, not from anger, though there was plenty of that, from humiliation, from the creeping thought that maybe they were right, maybe I was delusional, maybe my app really was just a silly idea that nobody wanted. I sat in my tiny apartment that night, staring at my laptop screen. The app interface looked the same, but somehow everything felt different. Smaller, less important. My family's laughter kept echoing in my head. An app for people who can't figure out dinner. Then my phone buzzed with a message notification. A beta user named Maria had sent me a long note through the app's feedback system. "Sophie, I don't know if you'll see this, but I had to tell you something. I'm a single mother with 3 kids. Before your app, grocery shopping was a nightmare. I'd wander the store for hours, spending money I didn't have on ingredients that went bad before I could use them. My kids complained about dinner every night because nothing went together. I felt like such a failure as a mom. Your app changed everything. Last month, I saved over $200 on groceries. My kids are eating healthier. I'm not stressed about meal planning anymore. For the first time in years, I actually enjoy cooking for my family. Thank you for understanding what people like me really need. I read that message 3 times. Then I read it again. My family's wealth had made them forget what real problems looked like. They lived in a world where meal planning meant deciding between the country club restaurant or having their personal chef cook at home. They couldn't understand the daily stress of feeding a family on a tight budget because they'd never experienced it. But I had, and millions of other families were living it right now. That's when everything clicked into place. Their rejection wasn't about my business idea. It was about their inability to see past their own privilege. They didn't understand my market because they'd never been my market. The next morning, I made a decision that would change everything. I was going to succeed without them. Not to prove them wrong, though that would be a nice bonus, but to prove that solving real problems for real people was exactly what the world needed. What happened next would turn that moment of humiliation into the fuel for something bigger than any of us could have imagined. I committed to succeeding without family help, and what happened over the next 18 months still amazes me. Taking on additional consulting work meant 18-hour days, but every extra dollar went straight into app development. Sleep became optional, social life became non-existent. My apartment turned into mission control for Operation Prove Everyone Wrong. The grind was brutal, but something magical started happening. Angel investors actually understood what I was building. A startup accelerator in downtown accepted my application after seeing user engagement metrics that made their jaws drop. These people got it because they weren't blinded by privilege. My user base exploded organically. Turns out, when you solve a real problem for real people, they tell their friends. Then their friends tell their friends. One satisfied customer became 10, 10 became 100, 100 became thousands. The app launched officially with 10,000 downloads in the first month. Not bad for a silly idea, right? Local news picked up the story, then regional outlets. Suddenly, I was doing interviews about how technology could reduce family stress and food waste. The irony wasn't lost on me. Media coverage that my restaurant-owning uncle would have killed for was happening because I understood something he didn't. Revenue started rolling in through subscription fees and partnerships with grocery store chains. Major food companies wanted to integrate their products into my meal planning algorithms. Everything was accelerating faster than I dreamed possible. That's when the phone call came. A major food conglomerate wanted to acquire my app for $2.3 million. Not just buy the technology. They wanted me to stay on as director of family nutrition initiatives. My little app had caught the attention of people who fed millions of families every day. The acquisition meeting felt surreal. Executives in $1,000 suits discussing my innovative approach to addressing meal planning pain points. These weren't people making fun of my target market. They were people who recognized that my target market represented most of America. But here's where things got really interesting. During the due diligence process, my new corporate parent company mentioned they'd recently become a silent partner in several restaurant group expansions, investment portfolio stuff. Nothing I paid much attention to until I saw a familiar name on the paperwork: Robert Harris Restaurant Group. Yeah, that Robert Harris. My uncle's business expansion was partially funded by the same company that just bought my silly app. The universe has a twisted sense of humor sometimes. Then I saw the social media posts about his new flagship restaurant opening, the grand event of the season, according to his marketing team. Local celebrities, food critics, investors, the whole 9 yards. He was finally getting the recognition he'd always craved. What he didn't know was that his former charity case niece now had technical influence over his business future through corporate partnership agreements. Not direct control, but enough leverage to make things very interesting. I wasn't planning to attend his grand opening. Honestly, I had better things to do than watch Uncle Robert pat himself on the back. But something about the timing felt like destiny knocking on my door. 2 years ago, I'd sat in my crappy apartment wondering if my family was right about my foolish dreams. Now I was worth more than his entire restaurant chain, and he had no idea. The evening of his grand opening, I stood in front of my closet deciding what to wear. Not the Target business casual from the family reunion. This time, I had options that matched my new reality. Professional attire that actually fit properly, confidence that came from proving everyone wrong, and a story that was about to come full circle in ways Uncle Robert never saw coming. What happened that night would test everything I'd learned about success, revenge, and what really matters when you finally have the power to settle old scores. I walked into that gleaming restaurant wearing a tailored blazer that cost more than my old monthly rent. Uncle Robert was holding court near the bar, gesturing wildly while telling investors about his natural business instincts and how tech entrepreneurs are just flash-in-the-pan kids who got lucky. The irony was delicious. He didn't recognize me at first. 2 years of success had changed more than just my bank account. Better clothes, professional confidence, and the kind of posture that comes from proving everyone spectacularly wrong. I waited until he finished bragging about his family business acumen before approaching his little investor circle. "Excuse me," I said, extending my hand to his business partner. "I'm Sophie Harris, founder of NutriPlan, the meal planning app that was just acquired for $2.3 million a Robert's wine glass stopped halfway to his mouth. His face went through about 5 different expressions in 3 seconds: recognition, confusion, panic. "Sophie," he forced a laugh that came out strangled. "What a surprise." His investor friend perked up immediately. "NutriPlan? We've been following that success story. Brilliant market positioning." "Thank you," I smiled. "It's amazing what happens when you solve real problems for real people." Robert's jaw tightened. He knew exactly what I meant. "You know," I continued, addressing his business partners while Robert squirmed, "my acquisition company recently became involved in restaurant industry investments, including expansion financing for certain local restaurant groups." The color drained from Robert's face as the implications sank in. But here's the thing about real success: it changes you in ways revenge fantasies never capture. Standing there, watching him realize that his former charity case niece now had actual influence over his business future, I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no desire for payback, just pity for someone who'd been so blinded by his own privilege that he'd missed what actually mattered. "Robert," I said quietly, "my silly app now feeds more families in a single day than your restaurants serve in a year. Those people you thought couldn't afford your food, they're the ones who made me successful." I pulled out my business card. "When you're ready to feature some of your recipes in our family, meal plans call me. Turns out there's room for both of us to succeed." Walking away that night, I realized the best revenge had been succeeding on my own terms. My family's rejection had accidentally set me free to find people who actually understood my vision. Sometimes the best thing that can happen is having the wrong people tell you no.